But yeah, hey everyone. So yeah, for those of you who've never been to one of these sessions before, what we gonna do today is basically for every single challenge we have two different webinars, right? We have one of them which is called a workshop. During the workshop, what we do is we talk a little bit about the data set, some of the things that we notice, some of the tips and tricks we kind of think that could be useful for you. We're gonna be talking about the visuals, some of the data modeling, perhaps. We'll see where things goes, right? It's never the same thing because the data sets change, and because of the data sets changing, that also changes the topics that we're discussing. Sometimes, for example, Federico talks about how to create layouts on Figma. We had an amazing session about that, I remember. Sometimes we talk more specifically about the data modeling part of things, sometimes just the visual part of things. So, it's a mixed bag of different experiences.
No,
But yeah,
no,
go ahead. Yeah.
it is very interesting. I mean, if you are giving me the same thing every single webinar, I'm not coming. I want variety. So that's
Yeah.
the reason we actually try to give you different stuff and to show somehow different stuff.
Yeah, because remember, the main idea about the webinars itself, it's not necessarily to prove you're the best. Sure, it's one of the reasons why you're here, right? You want to prove and create something that and showcase that you are the best. But on the other hand, the reason why these sessions happen, why the challenges happen, is because what we're trying to kind of create is an environment where you guys can play around with things. You can learn new things, you can experiment with things. Because to be fair, you can't really always do that in real work environments, right? You're going to have specific reports that you have to create, you have to follow specific guidelines. So you don't have a lot of room to experiment with things. So I think challenge is an amazing tool for that.
Correct.
All right. So what else? Yeah, about the data set, the Q&A session, and of course, do not forget, guys, that we have always been doing this. You have an opportunity by submitting your feedback to participate in the giveaway from Pact and get an amazing ebook. And me and Federico have always said this, every single time you do participate, you have this a shadow increase of percentage of probability that you're going to be winning the challenge, right?
Yep.
You never know if it works, you never know if it doesn't work, but hey, we're saying this, so it's probably true. But yeah, before we go into the data set itself, there is one topic that I want to quickly cover, and that is the developer's license for ZoomCharts visuals. So what I'm gonna quickly do is share my screen, make sure I'm sharing the right one, hiding everything that's unneeded. I think this one is the one that I need. Moving the screens, perfection. So whenever you're gonna go into the challenges, I've been doing this for a couple of times now, but the reason why I want to cover this today specifically is because we changed the approach that we have taken here before. So before, what you did is you either sign up if it's the first time, or you sign in with a Microsoft or a Zoom Charts account if you already had one. And what basically you had on the other end, I need to enter a pin. No, I'm not going to enter a pin. Fine. Let's go ahead again. Challenges. That's what happens when you go into the incognito mode, right? Let me drag in a new tab, which is not going to be incognito. So if I open up the challenges and I then you can see right here, we've always had that opportunity to see your developer's license, or if you didn't have one, you could sign up for a developer's license. Now, what changed is that previously this developer's license was essentially a new account that we created for you, which had all the licenses for our visuals. What we did, I think last or 2 weeks ago, is we launched a different type of license, which is a developer's license. So the main reason why we wanted to go with this is because previously, some of you who have worked with the challenge datasets before, it was a little bit annoying when you had to, for example, if you had an existing Power BI account, you had to log out from your account, log in with the challenge account because that gave you the rights to the visuals, and it's basically back and forth. You have to remember all those passwords, and we kind of wanted to remove that part. Previously was the only way on how to do this, so now we introduced a new way. So what we did is You can still sign up for the developer's license, but it's no longer an account. Now, what's going to happen is we're going to be issuing a developer's license per se with key and hash, which are going to be the variables that allow you to unlock the visual. So, if I, for example, go for a completely where I had this, it's always hiding when you need it. This one. So, get developer's license. You can see you can sign out with your work emails. Validate, of course, it's going to be verification email sent and so forth, but the main idea, and I'm actually gonna ask also Alexandra to maybe post this link in the chat, not a report example, sorry guys, but this one, the little blog post regarding the developer's license. The reason why this is going to be linked as well is because it explains in a little bit more detail what the developer's license means. But essentially, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be giving you a key and a hash, right? Now, what the key and hash does and how it works is you can apply it on any of your existing Power BI accounts. So, for example, let's see. If I open up, you can see I also have some expired licenses because it's part of being a part of a team within ZoomCharts. You have licenses that have expired, you have valid licenses because we're testing different states and so forth. But once you sign up for the developer's license, you can download. It says download. You're gonna download the JSON file. It'll be this little file right here. What that key and hash essentially allows you to do is to unlock the visuals. Now, how it works is, let me show you very quickly. I'm just going to apply some default theme. So right now you can see I have these preview windows. This is stating that, hey, this visual has been in a previous state. I can work with it for 12 hours. After that, it's going to be showcasing unlicensed, right? In order to apply the JSON file, which will be the developer's theme, you download the JSON file from your account. Then you go in right here in the top menu view, drop down menu, browse for themes, and just find where you had that license. So in my case, for example, it was under downloads, this one right here. Once I apply it, you can see I no longer have that preview. I can see it's an active license. It's for 1 year. I can work with it. I can use all the visuals and so forth. Now, one of the major changes that's happening as well is previously when you had your account, the visuals were pre-downloaded for you. Now, with this approach, we also didn't want to do that because sometimes it affected the performance and things. So now what you have to do is in order to get the visuals is you actually have to open up the app source. So for example, get more visuals and just type in Zoom charts once it decides to showcase. It's a live session, so why would it be fast? So for example, apply, click on it, it's going to open up the visuals page, and all you have to do is just add it right here. And because you have the JSON theme applied, I don't have to worry about any other activation. I can just have the pie chart right here, for example. I can say that it doesn't really matter what the data is going to be. I just wanted to showcase something. There you go. And you can see through the formatting options, license settings, there's a key and hash pre-filled. So the JSON theme basically controls these fields and it pre-fills these values so that these visuals are going to be working without any issues with all the features and everything. You don't have to worry about it. The good thing is that you can also add only the visuals that you are going to be using. You don't necessarily have to add, 20 visuals just because we have them. You only add those visuals which are going to be utilized within the report. It's one of the best practices as well. Right? Don't necessarily overcrowd with custom visuals. Use only those that are going to be actually in the report. Don't have 20 extra which are not going to be utilized because those are resources that have to be downloaded, connected, verified, and so forth.
I got a
Yeah.
couple of
Go
questions.
ahead. Sure.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. One, you need to be connected to Power BI service to be able to download new visuals, correct? If I want to get more visuals, I need to
hmm
be in Power BI service somehow.
Yes and no. So
Okay.
there are two ways, right? If you want to download directly from the app source, use this get more visuals option, you need to be signed in with an account because it
Okay.
has to double check who's actually downloading. Alternatively, if you don't have an account, what you can do is you can just go online. So for example, I'm going to open up right here this page and just say AppSource Timeline Pro, for example.
Okay, and you download it for the.
Exactly. So you open up the page, and here where it says install for free, not available in my billing region. Well, it's not available in my billing region. But an alternative is that install free is basically a download option.
But
So it downloads the, yeah,
what
go ahead.
that if I am in my Power BI file,
Hmm. So
if I bring them down, this will give me a JSON file or a PBI file.
so if you download from the app source, it's going to give you a PBI viz file, which is a physical visual file. It looks exactly the same
Yes.
as
So if I
Power
want
BI.
another ZoomChart visual, what
Hmm.
happen? I
So
have
then
now two
afterwards,
Power BI files. Is it?
it's going to look like two different Power BI files. But the difference is that PBI viz file cannot be opened directly when you just click on it. What you have to do is open up your existing Power BI report, click on the ellipsis, import a visual from file, and then it's going to give you this prompt. The reason why they're giving you this prompt is because when you're downloading directly through the app source, they already have pre-verified everything, right? You're not downloading or adding random things. Whereas here, a PBIS file, they don't know the source of it. But you basically just find the file version. You can see, for example, this is some sort of a test version that we had. Just click OK, and now you have a new visual icon.
Okay.
That's it.
Now, if I got access to Power BI service, do I go to the Get More Visual, download the visuals from Switcher that I want, and
Mhm.
then load the JSON file, or the other way around?
Wouldn't matter. You can do it both
Well,
ways. I would recommend always to apply the theme prior to downloading the visuals because then you already know everything's going to be licensed, but it's going to work both ways regardless. We had a question I see in the comments. Can I still use the ZoomCharts account or should I log off and get your personal? You can still use the old ZoomCharts accounts. They're still going to be active. You don't have to worry about it. It's just that this is going to be a new type of license that we're now issuing to kind of give you a little bit more flexibility.
okay, I don't know, Crystal, if you are there listening, I need you to investigate how to get Power BI service for free because it's going to be easier
Yeah.
to do this than the other way. So please check it out and let me know in our chat. Thank you. That's it.
So if you have downloaded the JSON file, what you have to do is open up your Power BI report. Top menu, find the view section. Right here, where you have all these color palettes, there's a little arrow going downwards. Browse for themes. Find the JSON file and just open it, and it's gonna apply it. Basically, the JSON file is the theme file, right? So some of you have worked maybe with different theme files. It's exactly the same thing. So for example, I can apply one of the my old, for example, theme files, which just has, let's say, different color variations or something. So you can see things changed, but the license has been applied. It's the
Okay.
same experience.
So it is better to load the JSON file and then apply your custom columns if you want to in the theme, because if you do your custom column first and then you load the JSON file, it will take the JSON file color palette, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
So guys, load the JSON file and then you change your color or you enter your color palette.
But yeah, other than that, should be smooth sailing. You can use all the visuals. There are some restrictions on publishing side, but nothing that's going to majorly impact the performance of the visuals or anything like that. So you get to go on that side.
Perfect.
All right. Now regarding the dataset, I think you wanted to start, Federico,
Yeah,
right?
let me try to get to. I'm terrible sharing.
No
As
worries.
usual, can I share? Yes. Okay. I want to share this window. Yeah, but I don't want to share that. I want to, no, I'm gonna share that. Okay, guys, if you go through the data set, one of the issues, no issues, is a data set that how they give it to me, my client, okay, is that there is no a proper or normal way to do a relationship between a student and teachers. Okay, so if you get the students and the teacher in a filter and you try to filter the student of a teacher, it will not do it. Okay, so you might need to work it out and create what we call a bridge table. Okay, I think Alexandra have a link to a video we recently put on YouTube about how to create that bridge table. You might need to work it out. Now, another thing that I have realized is that basically all teachers teach all students, and all students have all the same teacher because it's not a super big school. Okay, so whether it is worth for you to do or not, I think it's good because you learn to create a bridge table. You might not see much different because we have 5 teachers and 50 students. So basically everybody is taught by the same teachers and all the teachers teach, okay, all the students, okay. But if you realize that problem, okay, um, remember you can create a bridge table. And a bridge table, what it does is bring column from one place to another place, okay, that they are common on this table, and then you can make a relationship with them. So that filter that is not working, it's working. You are gonna have to play with bi-directional stuff. Okay, so I think it's a very interesting exercise, guys, if you want to learn how to use bridge table or how to make them and why sometimes you need to make them. Okay, then another little problem, and I think you will talk about it. That column, guys, you need to, the columns in the tables with the URL is this one. Make sure you, it's image URL or web image, no? Avis, it's
Yeah, it's
image.
image.
Remember to categorize it. Mine is not categorized, it's still working, so I don't know how this Power BI does anymore. And then the idea, guy, is for you to, Avis is gonna show you some visual that I actually saw them, and they're quite actually good. But you can also use the new filter, okay, to bring all these to a scene, maybe top 10 or top 5, okay, with a nice table to see how ABBA is doing. I have not decorated that filter at all. It's just as it can, okay? You can use year to see how the average changes, okay? So my idea will be how can I make something that if I am a teacher, okay, I can enter the name of an student, okay, it will bring up a card or a filter or something. It will show me the picture of that student with all his information, name, family name, gender, age, and all the information we have in a student. And I can present it nicely, okay, in a card or in a table. Okay, that is the challenge. And think about that, that is how this teaching or school control, okay, their students. Okay, that is one of the ideas. Remember, I haven't touched this at all. Okay, remember you had different stages. You had default, you got hover, you got selected, press selected, so you can change the color of that in the way that you like it. You can use picture not only on filter, you can also use it on the new car. And I think we have a very good example. And guys, there is a very nice video of bus document on YouTube, that actually you go the front car, okay, with the photo and some information, and there is a little arrow that you click the arrow and it kind of flip. Kind of, it's not flipping, it just look like flipping, and you have further information. Check that video that video in YouTube out, and try to do um, something cool. And we have the same, and we have the same with the t-shirts. Okay, so how do you tackle the challenge? For me, having pictures and everything is, this one is gonna be look fantastic. Okay, what approach if I am the school principal? I would like to open my report, maybe a nice intro page. I want to see the student where I can select an student ID, okay, and a card will give me all the information about this student, and so on. Think about that, okay, and that is what I would like you to think about this challenge. This challenge is where you really, really think about how cool I can make this for a school principal. Okay, is that, or for the teacher to check? Okay, kind of, I don't know, kind of, you open something and you click in there, you have an image, you got details, you got data, you got some visual that Avis is going to explain you in a minute. Okay, I made that super really, really, really cool. Okay, we have our prices, but if anyone participating this time surprise me, really surprise me, I will talk to that person privately and probably give an extra special, super special prize. Evil, that is for me today, Alessandra. Thank you, guys.
So let's grab the screen as well. Do, 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 do. All right, my take at it. Nothing super fancy, but just gonna talk about a couple of things. So the first thing that I just, as always, right, whenever you come across one of these reports, is we highly recommend, and Federico kind of already touched upon this, but don't forget that there are different questions that you can answer with it. If you don't know where to start off, because that typically happens when you're starting with Power BI and a new report, right? So what do we even look for? What am I going to showcase or anything? If you have no ideas, the brief is an amazing tool that allows you to understand the overall use case and some of the questions that you might explore. It doesn't necessarily mean, like we've always said, or we even say it here now, because we had a lot of questions about it. You don't have to answer all of them. You don't have to answer specifically these. You can go with any different direction as well. These are just some of the ideas so you can start the analysis. What has happened to me as well when I'm, for example, creating these samples is I start off with one of the points that I have here, but essentially start to expand on that point, right? I start to showcase, okay, I want to see a timeline of, for example, overall average score. Okay, once I do that, then look at the data set and be like, okay, we actually have this dimension, we have this, and then I start to play around with what's available and just try to put it all in within the Power BI report. So what I usually start off with, in most cases, is if there is a calendar dimension, it means there is some sort of a time component to it. Now, how you utilize depends completely on you. Because in this data set, I think there are two approaches as well. You can go with an actual calendar, or you can go with, let's call it a fiscal calendar, right? With a custom calendar, basically. right? Because every single school in different countries, different regions is going to operate differently as well. They have semesters, terms, they split it into years, right? It's not specifically 2023, 2024, and so forth. It actually goes from 2022 to 2023, from 2023 to 2024, because it goes between those two different years. And those are two different, completely different views. One is a calendar view, one is sort of a custom calendar view, right? So that already determines, okay, how am I going to approach this? What I wanted to do is I wanted to keep the actual calendar, but if I ever decide that, hey, I actually want to have the ability, you can always have, for example, something like a slicer, right? I could go ahead and add just a basic slicer, for example. We had the academic years with the long names. I created also a short version of it, and I also created a combined version which gives me the shortened years plus the semester, for example. So play around with what's available to you. Find the view that you think is going to be most beneficial. Because what this allows me to do is, for example, if I would be, a principal of a school, sure, seeing a timeline is cool. But at the same time, for example, I might want to focus on a particular semester. I want to see how that semester is in comparison to the other one, right? So this is what allows me to, for example, select those particular time units and kind of see, okay, how are things actually working? How are they interconnected and so forth? So that's one of the approaches that you can look into. For the timeline itself, there are a couple of things that I did here. And I just wanted to also take you through them because some of these are new features they've implemented. Some of them have been there since the very beginning, some of them are a little bit more newer. So if I start to create timeline visual, there we go, a timeline visual from scratch. So what you're going to need is a hierarchy. So I'm just going to use, like I said, I'm going to use the calendar hierarchy, the actual calendar as a basis. So I'm using the dates. As for the values, well, I could go with a calculation, or if I'm super lazy, like in this case, I'm just going to be using score. But using a sum of score makes absolutely zero sense. So just think about it, right? Average score makes a little bit more sense. Summing those things up makes zero sense. Averaging, it's kind of a little bit better. But you can also go ahead and, for example, use the same score, for example, as a series too, and say, hey, I actually want to also highlight, for example, as a dynamic part, what's the minimum score in that particular period? What's the maximum? And then you kind of have a floating area that shows you in between the boundaries where the actual current score is located, right? So you can play around with these values even with just a single score. But what I did next is whenever I see these sort of charts, and I think Federico can agree with me, even if I split it down to quarters or months, it just looks super
Yeah,
boring because everything looks exactly the same, right? So, one of the things that you can do in these sort of situations, but always be careful when you utilize this. What we do by default is we force you to draw from zero. The main reason why this is typically done within data visualization is to not to confuse or kind of morph the actual visual. The other way that you can do this is by going into primary y-axis, for example, zero line, you can switch it to floating. You can see it suddenly looks like a completely different chart. What in reality happens is, like I said, visible always forces zero to be visible and draws from that up until. Floating, what it does, it finds in the current view the min and the max values and kind of scales between them. So you can focus on the changes a little bit better, but at the same time, it's a double-edged sword. It looks more interesting, but for example, if we're looking at this value and this value, it looks like this is basically like 5 or 6 times higher, where it really isn't. It's a relative scale that's being applied. So it's a tricky point, but it's something that is being utilized in data
I
visualization.
think it's important to people know that a lot of the stuff we see in LinkedIn or in YouTube video, those data sets are prepared for the visual to look fantastic.
Oh
And
yeah, of
okay,
course.
you see this line curve and everything up and down. That is prepared for that to give you that impression. In real life, in my day-to-day work, you are gonna find more equality. Okay, more of
More these.
that. Okay, that is fantastic, beautiful. Okay, visual that our very dear friend show us in LinkedIn. So take that into account. One thing is what you're gonna get in your
Yeah.
real life data set. And another thing is the sample you saw or watch in YouTube.
Yeah, it really depends on what message you're trying to convey with this, right? Because this is a trick that's also been heavily used in like media, for example, where comparing, let's say, like 11% versus 13%. It seems like it's a massive increase. In reality, it's just a small little increase in between the numbers, right? So it's something that can be utilized for both purposes. Let's just put it like that. But yeah, so one of the things is I switched to floating because since this is a challenge, right? It's not an actual use case. I want the visual to actually showcase
Yeah.
some difference, and I want to focus on this. If I wanted to explicitly say, don't forget, you have the option of creating additional items where, for example, on hover, you say, hey, the scale is actually adjusted on relative scale, so the changes are more visible, for example, or differences. So there are different things that you can apply. So that's one of the things that I did. The other thing that I did is if we go to x-axis, by default, for example, right now we're on a quarterly display unit. And you can see that by default, what our chart was always doing is showcasing the beginning of the quarter, which makes sense, right? That's the beginning month of it. But it's not always visually very easy to understand because people are used to having Q1, Q2, Q3, and so forth, or for example, from to and these sort of options. So what we also released is the option of going under x-axis, and you can see right here, for example, I'm now in quarters. I can choose the quarter display format. So I can go with the quarter full names or just Q1 or Q3 or showcase the first and the last month. So it's going to adapt based on the space. But this at least allow you to kind of play around with it a bit more, align it a little bit more properly, just have few more visual options basically. So this is one of the other things that I did. I went with the shortened Q version of quarters and I aligned them to the center so it's more visually appealing. So that's the second thing that I did. What I also did here is I'm going to adjust it to dynamic all data. And I'm going to show you why I'm doing this. If I would have a slicer right next to this chart, and I'm going to be using the same calendar, the date, right? I have this basically timeline, right, slicer. So if dynamic all data, which is a property that you enable or disable, is disabled, this is the experience that I get. I can shorten the timeline, I cut it off, but you can see now I have a lot of white space. Because what it does, it says, this is where I'm supposed to be. I'm just putting in the additional data or taking it away. The tricky part with this is if you have zoomed in, for example, like this, and then you add more data, you can see I have this arrow now. I can't go to there, but the chart didn't move because this was the view where I was on. So for example, again, right, gonna shorten it. You see it like this, add extra data. There's actually more data going to the previous years, but I don't see it necessarily. So dynamic all data is a property that allows you to adjust it based on what's available. So if I increase the data range, you can see it's always gonna kind of zoom in or zoom out based on what's available. And this is one of those tricks that you can always see if it's possible with other visuals as well, because it allows the user to see what I'm actually filtering or what I'm allowing the user to cross filter, right? You want to make sure that the user knows what he's looking at. So that's another thing that I did. I enabled the dynamic all data just to make sure that the user always sees everything. What I'm always doing is make sure you enable the reset button because it's a very quick tool that allows you to just reset the chart, right? Especially when you're customizing things and playing around. It's very easy to get lost.
You just come back.
Now,
What I do is just come back. I always come back. When I go lost, I come back to where I was,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
click a little type back. Okay,
I mean,
now I'm here.
for years, what I was doing is just basically every single time I get lost with something, and unless it's, something that comes through a slicer, because slicers are permanent, I just quickly move between the pages. Nah, this is where I want it to be. But if it's a slicer, it's not going to clear. So, different experiences. Or just always create a bookmark that has a reset state. That's also a good approach. Um, the other thing that I also did here is under advanced settings. and this is something that we also recently added. We actually have these two little toggles now. So, and this drop down as well. Enable scrolling, enable zooming, and display unit preferences. So preferences kind of makes sense, right? What basically it's going to do, it's going to try to adapt whether you want the highest available unit or the lowest available unit or something in between automatically based on the space. The chart is going to try to figure out which one is best. Scrolling and zooming are properties that you have here that allow you to define, okay, how do I want the user to be able to interact with the chart? Now, what I mean by this, I think scrolling, I would most likely always keep there because what it does is if I disable it, I can't move the chart to the left or the right anymore, right? For example, if I'm zoomed in, I can only use these navigation arrows to kind of move between certain times of periods, but I can't move like 1/4 to the left, just 1/4 to the left, right? If this is enabled, you can move the chart back and forth. The other option, zooming, is something that I've noticed a lot more being used because one of the things that the chart does is it tries to understand how much data is available, and you can see it also changes between the units. Whenever I try to zoom in, it splits down into smaller granularity or combines it into a higher one. So sometimes when you have, for example, a lot of the data, even the slightest zoom up, see, goes between the units because there's just so much data. So what people do is they disable the zooming so that you can scroll, but you're not going to be accidentally zooming in and out, back and forth, and kind of getting completely lost. So this is just part of the experience that you as a developer have to play around with. You have to show it to the actual end user and figure out, okay, which one I'm using. In this case, it's quite simple. You're the user. That's it. So play around with these things, see what
And
makes
I know it
sense.
might sound magic for you. Avi have been doing this for the last how long?
At this point, it's 8 years,
8 years.
yeah. So
Okay. Yeah. So it also alien sometimes for me, but with practice and working with them, that you get to that easy of movement. Okay, and the
absolutely.
controlling the graphics.
No, trust me, when I started off, it wasn't that fast. I was going through the settings the same, just going at it. Okay, there's no definition of it. Okay, is there something in the documentation? No. Okay, let's just play around with it and see what it actually does. And that's what you do with every single custom visual, right? You play around with these settings and try to figure out, okay, what else can I do with it? But yeah, that is one of the things. Initial display period, or in this case, unit. I'm also going to switch to quarters because yearly view kind of looks good, but I wanted to start on quarters. So that, and then the last thing that I did was thresholds. Enable thresholds. The threshold type is going to be a line. It's not going to be a constant value. It's going to be an average based on series one. So you can always check which series you are referencing. You can reference any of the series that are within the chart. I'm going to be referencing the first series, which is going to be the actual score. Just going to make it, for example, darker color, thicker line. Just having a line, remember, do not do this unless the user specifically knows what that line represents. Do not just keep random lines. It's not helping anyone. Tell us what that line indicates, right? So tell me that this is, for example, average score. A lot more understandable what I'm seeing right now than just a random black line going throughout the columns, right? So that is my average score, and I'm seeing, okay, in which quarters have we been above or below a certain threshold and how it's actually comparing. Switch it to monthly view, again, taking all those results into account. In this view, the average is this. So which months? You can, of course, go ahead and say, okay, I have this. What else can I do? Well, series one, you can also imply some conditional formatting based on a value, referencing the same value. So there are different ways on how to go with it. Just one of the things to remember is I like when people are creative, but don't overcomplicate things. Make sure the visual is understandable, readable, and it gives you a story. Because sometimes, sure, you can do a lot of things. Trust me, you can do a lot of things with this chart. But sometimes people make it so complex that without a PhD, you don't know what you're looking at.
And that is
So
key for me.
it's a
That
fine
that is
line.
key for me, guys. I follow in my day-to-day work a technique that I mentioned before is keep it simple, stupid. So simple that,
Yeah,
oh, that is so simple, it's stupid, yet, but you understand it. Okay?
that's the main goal of a
Exactly. It's
visual.
not always easy, but if you try to keep it just real for the people that the report is made to, okay, the better for you. And I'm telling that because all this fancy stuff you see on LinkedIn, you don't use that in a report. I don't use SVG in report. I don't use error bar in my client report or very, very little time. Okay, don't get confused. And another we are talking here, my friend Imran Rafiq said, but our purpose is to derive insights. And I need an explanation for insights. Because what we show normally they are metrics that are known to the company. Okay, you have in your account. Okay, it's by filtering and drill throughing and all of that that you might find some insights. Okay, something that we say eureka. Okay, but
Hmm.
normally it's numbers that we know. Okay, and we kind of discover storytelling or different stories by filtering. Okay, drill through. Okay, and that when you find this fantastic insight. Why I am losing money on tables if I'm selling millions of tables, and why in the region of or in the country of Italy. And then you start carry on checking, and a memo with a 15% on table that you applied 3 months ago is still in application. And then you have to call Italy, guys, get rid of that 50%. Okay, that is the insight. Other else is
Yeah.
just metric, simple metric. Okay, I want you to make that different. Okay, to understand a little bit all the concept what we try to tell you in LinkedIn and all that about the storytelling, blah 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 blah. Focus on what you are displaying. You are telling me the revenue that my accountant can tell me that over the phone in a call. Okay, I can go through it. I can filter by country, by city, by seller, and that is what Power BI give us, in my personal view. Okay, the advantages. Okay, that's it. I'm not talking
Yeah.
today anymore. Amy.
No, no, but it's a good point because the main idea about a data visual is not necessarily always to give you a straightaway action, right? The data visual's first purpose is to showcase which points are interesting, which points you should pay attention to. And then there's a different part which gives you the analytical part of why this is important, what happened, what should I do, and so forth, right? So it's kind of a mix of different things. But what Federico said is exactly what Power BI is meant for, right? It's not a static analytics, because that is one of the key kind of, I think, issues that happens a lot of times when people come from typical Excel reports to Power BI. They do the same thing. They create two-dimensional reports which are very static. The power of Power BI is that you can click on other things. Suddenly everything changes. You click on a specific nationality, it cross filters the data, right? Your actions impact the result, and through that exploration, you find those actionable insights. You find, okay, so this is the issue. Now I have to tackle this. I don't have the data here, but at least I know who to ask about this now. Instead of just going to the whole audience and be like, I think we have an issue, guys. So what do we do? It gives you that ammunition of how to
That
talk with people and how to figure it.
last thing, I promise, Abel, just one more thing. When we are
Sure.
talking, when we talk about storytelling with data, if we create a report with a story, okay, that report is only valid for that story. That's it. Guys, that is not dynamic anymore. It's that written or prepared, built for one story. Okay?
Yeah.
So actually you can do data storytelling, but it's not what people really think about it normally. If you create a report with a story, it's only valid for that story, that particular one. Now, if you create a report with all the information of the company, how your director want to, you can discover other stories, okay, by filtering and drill through. And I can discover more stories, and Avis can play in a different angle, okay, from the same report
Hmm.
and create, okay, a new story.
Yeah. So even if you see, for example, other samples online from what other contestants have created, don't get discouraged by the fact that I was going a completely different way, but everybody else is doing something else. Okay, that's a different story. You're doing your own thing. So just play around with it. But one thing that I just remembered looking at these two, uh, and this is the reason why it's so important to sometimes create the visuals and then play around with what's available, right? Because what I was doing is I was wanted to see, okay, I have the timeline of average scores, right? And we do have a property in the fact table that basically tells me the final grade whether I have passed it or I have failed a particular test. So logically thinking, those who have passed should have a higher grade because all of them have passed. Those who have failed should have a lower grade. But if you take the original column value, you play around and see, okay, failed. Average score 69.48. You can see probably the position against in the grade, so that's also something to take into account. But if I switch to passed, the difference is basically non existent. So something just doesn't feel right. And if you check the data, what happens is failed and passed sometimes is basically used for both situations where the results are very high for when it's very low. So what I recommend to do is just create a new column. You have the score. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, right? So you have the score value. Just create a basic if column and say that, hey, if score is above 50, for example, it's passed, otherwise it's failed. The number itself, again, it's very dependent on your region, school, and it really depends. I just went with the middle, right? If it's above 50, you're good. Below, should probably work a little bit more.
Yeah, go home, go home,
Go
start working on that. Yeah,
study a bit more, come
go
back
back to
later.
work.
So yeah, if I do that, now you can see there's a complete difference, right? All the failed, so average score is like 42 something, whereas all who have passed 70. Okay, this makes a little bit more sense. Once I have that, I can start to play. Okay, and so I have the timeline. I can focus, for example, on those who have passed. What else I have here? I have teachers, I have students, I have subjects, I have different assessment types, and so forth. So any one of those dimensions, is a view that you can investigate further. So what I did here is I basically went the student approach on one part, and then I also went with a little bit of a subject. Because the reason what I wanted to do here is essentially I was thinking like this, right? So if I'm a principal of a school and somebody says, has there been any development in a particular, for example, department or any particular teacher? In my case, those are students, those could be also teachers. I could say, okay, lately a lot of parents, for example, I don't know, have been complaining about the history grades on the last exam or whatever, right? So what I'm going to do is first of all filter it out and see, okay, is there any fluctuation in between the results? I can see, okay, we're kind of high, then we went a little bit lower, but now it's kind of okay. Quarter three, remember these are average scores. Relative scale seems a lot, but it's not a massive difference. So this is the reason why it's tricky. But okay, so there has been a decrease here. So maybe there's a reason why I should investigate it. Because before it was almost pretty much the same. Now suddenly there is a dip. So I have to investigate it. Which takes me next one. Okay, if I have history, lower results, highlight this part, I'm gonna be looking at the scores of the students. Is the average per se low, or do we just have a high disparity? So we will have very lows and very high highs, right? So this is where the analytical part comes in. And I think Federico can agree with me. Guys, trust me, as much as you want to run away from the tables, at one point, shape, or form, you're going to have them in in the report. It's just inevitable
Oh
because
no, no,
people want that
I
detail.
recommend you to practice and do better at building nice looking tables, okay? Because I don't have no report in my Word that have no one, two, or more than two tables.
Yeah.
So it's something that you need to work it out, okay? Because they are, remember, these people is coming from Excel mainly, okay?
Hmm.
Okay, and they are The people with Excel, they are table, and they are the one with the finger pointing to the numbers. So they are okay. So remember, building good tables is important.
Absolutely. And the more you know, the better it's going to be for you as well, because you're going to know how to format the table and everything. And also, you don't always have to try to squeeze in a table because, Ivis and Federico said that. No, remember, you have, for example, bookmarks. You can have it on a completely separate page, which is specifically meant for that detailed analysis. Or you can do something like this, right? I have it by time, but I can switch it also as a table. And there's going to be a complete difference on how people are perceiving this information. But there's going to be one part of audience, for example, loves this, hates the timeline, and vice
Yeah.
versa. There's going to be an audience who looks at this and be like, okay, but how do I kind of, because for example, right here, right, we have a lot of different invoices, but how does it look on a timeline? Whereas the other part is, I don't care about the time, just give me the invoices. So it's playing around with those different audiences, and you as a developer just playing around with, okay, how or what else I could do here.
No, not only that, at the end of the day, the report is for the people order you to do. It's not for you. Okay, the report
Oh
is
yeah,
not for Avi. It's not for Federico. It's for a client that has paid a lot of money. Okay, to build it for him. So whether we like it or not, sometimes we have to compromise the way he wants a pie chart in pink. That's what I'm gonna give him, a pie chart in pink, because he is paying your bills, and that's what he
there you go.
wants. But it's not correct, and not because but that is incorrect. It doesn't matter. It's the way he understands his numbers, and that what
Yeah,
is important. The client is happy because he can understand and see what is going on with his company. It's not about I don't like it or I don't think that is correct. Sometimes we have to actually get a compromise. Say, okay, that's what he wants, and that's what he wants. And you are going to realize that 90% of the time they will get what they want, and you will get
yeah.
not what you wanted. But that's what it is.
No, because one of the things that happens a lot of these cases is a lot of the times customer is going to get what they want initially because you want them to be satisfied, right? You want them to continue to work with you. But once you establish that relationship, you showcase them, okay, I'm fine, I'm creating whatever you asked. This is what you requested, right? But it's your job as a developer or a good report developer to also educate them and showcase, for example, okay, for now, let's go with this because you already are used to this, but let's just try this approach and
Yeah.
tell me what you think about it, right? We don't have to do it straight away. We can do it afterwards once you're getting used to Power BI a little bit more, once you know how to navigate through it. Because you always have to remember that different levels of savviness also are very impactful on how you create the report.
I actually, Avis, and I'm sorry, I when I asked to prepare a POC of a proof of concept,
Hmm.
okay, for a client, I do a normal page and a fancy one, as I call them, no, and the silly
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
Okay, so the normal one, okay, is what he told me to do, and the second page is something that listen is the same, but have a different look.
Yeah,
Okay, I always give that two options. Sometimes it's not about winning or lose. Sometimes he is okay. Yeah, Federico, go your way, or no, I prefer my way, and that is fair enough. But
yeah.
I give them the option.
Absolutely, because sometimes it's just sometimes even ends up somewhere in between, right? So okay, I see what you're saying. I want that, but with that.
Yeah, yeah, just a cocktail now.
Yep.
And
But it is
then
what
when
it
you
is.
start getting upset, no, that was not my intention. You had to pick one or the other.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah. But yeah, one last thing that I wanted to do is, so I think in the last top five announcement, I mentioned this to you guys, but it's actually live now. So for the latest donut version, there's two new fields that you have available for you, and that's KPI value and label. So
excellent.
what these do is you no longer have to create a new card visual which has the number, then put it on top of a
Please,
donut chart. Always remember the layering and everything. So you can now just add a value. You can add a label. Label is the label itself, right? It's just a label. But if you go into the formatting options, KPI card is the block where this is going to be controlled now. So you can play around a little bit with the alignment, whether you want to align it more to the top, bottom, or however you want to. My favorite is always make it centered. Padding, how to explain this setting is if I would put it at 0 and I would drill down, this now kind of reminds me of a native donut chart where you just have a new donut chart, right? So the padding is basically the additional padding you leave in the middle for those inner reference layers. So you
Awesome.
can make them bigger, smaller, depending on how you want to showcase them, right? So now you can see these small little inners. So that's one. The fill color, of course, play around, make it a little bit more visible or less visible. Make it your own, right? It's a tool for you guys to play around with. Format the decimals, the value labels, and the one thing that I always recommend to do as well is if you play around with it and something feels weird or you think that something is missing, let us know about it. It's the best way on how to fix things, right? Because trust me, as much as we would love to say that we have thought about everything, it's humanly impossible to think about every single scenario. Sometimes the things that people come up with, okay, it makes sense, but I just didn't think about it that way. So this is what we're adding also as a new feature. And I think the main benefit of it is that if you do have the padding, for example, it allows you to still keep that sort of zoom charts effect on the visual with the inner reference layers with the additional, for example, inner the donut charts. But if you want to refocus on it, when you hover over it, you can still see there's the back button. So the card is now part of the visual, right? It doesn't feel like it's somewhere in the matrix.
I actually think it's a great addition to the visual because I
Yeah,
normally get a visual card put it in between in the donut chart manually, and I had to play by putting on the right size and everything. So I think it's a great addition
yeah.
to
Because
the donut
in
chart.
theory, it's not that difficult, right? Add a card, put it on top, but then you always have to remember, okay, I
I
have to
got
make
to
sure
adjust.
that the layers
Yeah,
are correct and so forth.
correct, correct. No, no.
But
It's always a little bit of complication.
exactly,
If you want to be 100% or pixel perfect align, okay, so it's always a little bit
this
of
one
a
can do it now, actually.
correct.
But yeah, um, for me, yeah, it's also gonna be it. I hope it was interesting and you learned something new today. But yeah,
any any questions?
any questions, anything?
Guys, please, if you fill out the form and let us know how are we doing or what we can do more or else, please do it. If you don't do it, we cannot make it any better.